Today we're going to talk about an 1800-year-old investment advice that still works today. Somewhere around 200 AD, a group of rabbis sat down to debate Jewish law, business ethics, and the proper conduct of daily life. The result of centuries of these debates became the Talmud, a massive, sprawling text that covers everything from religious practice to property disputes to asset allocation. Buried in a section called Bava Metzia, page 42a, is a line of financial advice that modern portfolio managers would recognize instantly. Translated roughly as, let every person divide their money into three parts, one-third in land, one-third in business, and one-third kept in reserve. That is the whole rule. Divide your wealth into three roughly equal parts. One-third in real estate, one-third in active business or commerce, one-third held safely in cash or equivalent that is liquid for whatever comes. This is almost exactly what we call asset allocation in modern terms. The same diversification principle that financial advisors charge you a percentage of your portfolio to explain what was written down by rabbis debating Jewish law roughly 1,800 years before the term diversification existed in any financial textbook. Today we are going to unpack this rule, what it actually says, why it has held up for nearly 2 millennia, how it maps to modern investment categories, and how you can actually apply a version of it to your own finances starting this week. Section 1. Why a religious text is giving investment advice. Before we get into the mechanics, it's worth understanding why this advice exists at all, because the Talmud is not a finance book. It is a legal and ethical text. The fact that it contains detailed financial guidance tells you something important about how this tradition has historically viewed money. Jewish mentality does not treat wealth as morally suspicious or poverty as spiritually superior, a view that contrasts with some other religious and philosophical traditions throughout history. Wealth is generally treated as a tool, a responsibility, and frequently a blessing, provided it is acquired honestly and deployed with some degree of generosity. The Talmud includes extensive discussion of business ethics, fair pricing, honest weights and measures, and charitable obligation, alongside this kind of practical wealth management guidance. This matters for understanding the 33% rule, because it was never presented as a get-rich scheme. It was presented as prudent, responsible stewardship, the same energy as a parent telling you not to keep all your eggs in one basket, except it's a 1,800-year-old parent with significant legal authority. Modern researchers studying this have noted something striking. The financial logic underlying the rule maps closely to what 20th-century economists would later formalize as modern portfolio theory. The idea that you reduce risk not by avoiding risk entirely, but by spreading your capital across assets that behave differently from each other. Harry Markowitz won a Nobel Prize in 1990 for formalizing this mathematically. The rabbis got there first, without the math, just from watching how money actually behaves over a lifetime. Section 2, breaking down the three-thirds. Let's translate each third into language that makes sense for your bank account in the current year, rather than ancient Babylon. First third, land. In the ancient world, land was the ultimate stable asset. It could not be stolen easily, it could not evaporate in a bad business deal, and it tended to hold value across generations even when currencies and political systems changed completely. The medieval commentator known as the Maharsha explained this directly. Land is safe because it can never lose all its value, but its return is also relatively low compared to more active investments. In modern terms, this third maps onto real estate, and arguably more broadly onto any stable, tangible, appreciating asset class. Real investment trusts, or REITs, let modern investors access this category without buying physical property directly. The category could also reasonably include other historically stable hard assets. Here's the modern statistic that validates the ancient reasoning. U.S. residential real estate has appreciated at an average annual rate of approximately 4% over the past 50 years, with significantly lower volatility than equities. It is, just as the rabbis observed, the boring, stable leg of the stool. The second third, business. This is the active, higher-risk, higher-return category. In the ancient world, this meant trade goods, merchant ventures, commercial activity, putting capital to work in commerce where the upside was significant, but so was the risk of total loss. In modern terms, this maps directly to equities, stocks, business ownership, and active investment in companies. This is the growth engine of the portfolio. It is also historically the most volatile third. The S&P 500 has returned an average of approximately 10% annually over the past century, comfortably outperforming the land category. but it has also experienced drawdowns of 30% to 50% during major downturns, including 2008 and 2020. Higher returns. Higher stomach churning. Exactly as the ancient text predicted. The third, reserves. The final third is liquidity. Cash or cash equivalents held in reserve, not invested in anything, simply available. This is the third most modern investors underweight, because cash sitting idle feels like wasted opportunity in a culture obsessed with maximizing every dollar's return. But the rabbis were explicit about why this matters. One's money should always be ready to hand, meaning available for both emergencies and opportunities. This is, almost word for word, the modern concept of an emergency fund combined with what investors today call dry powder. Cash kept available specifically so you can act decisively when a genuine opportunity appears, rather than needing to liquidate other assets at an inopportune moment. In modern terms, this maps onto high-yield savings accounts, money market funds, short-term treasury bills, and CDs, instruments that preserve capital and remain liquid, even if they sacrifice significant growth potential to do so. Section 3. Why this structure actually works. The math behind the wisdom here is where we get into why this 1,800-year-old framework holds up so well against modern financial analysis, rather than just being a historical curiosity. The core principle at work is correlation, the degree to which different assets move in the same direction at the same time. The power of diversification comes specifically from combining assets that do not move in lockstep with each other. If everything in your portfolio rises and falls together, you have not actually diversified anything. You've just spread the same risk across more accounts. Real estate, equities, and cash have historically exhibited relatively low correlation with each other across most market cycles. When stocks crash, real estate often holds up reasonably well, or at least does not crash on the same timeline. When both stocks and real estate are under pressure, cash reserves remain completely stable by definition, because cash does not fluctuate in nominal value. Here's the mathematical case for why this matters more than people intuitively expect. A portfolio split evenly across three lowly correlated assets, even if each individual asset is somewhat volatile, produces a smoother overall return curve with a meaningfully lower maximum drawdown than a portfolio concentrated in a single asset class, even if that single asset class has a higher average return on paper. A study modeling this exact three-way Talmudic allocation against a 100% equity portfolio over a 40-year period found that the diversified version had approximately 30% lower volatility, while sacrificing only a modest amount of average annual return. For most people who are emotionally affected by volatility far more than economists assume in their models, this trade-off is enormously valuable. The investor who panics and sells during a 50% drawdown locks in a real loss. The investor in the smoother, diversified version is far less likely to panic in the first place, because the drawdown they experience is smaller, and the stable reserve third gives them a sense of control. This is the part modern finance sometimes forgets in pursuit of theoretically optimal returns. The best portfolio is not the one with the highest expected return. It is the one you can actually stick with through a full market cycle without making a panicked, value-destroying decision. The ancient rabbis, who were not running spreadsheets, obtained this wisdom from watching generations of merchants succeed and fail. Section 4. How to actually apply a modern version of this rule. Let's get practical. You are not buying ancient farmland in Babylon. Here is how to translate the 3/3 principle into an actionable modern framework. Step 1. Build your reserve component first. Before allocating to real estate or equities, establish your liquid reserve, generally 3 to 6 months of living expenses, held in a high-yield savings account earning 4% to 5% in the current rate environment. For the average household, this means $10,000 to $25,000, depending on your monthly expenses. This is not a third of your eventual total portfolio at every stage of life. Particularly early on, your reserve will represent a larger proportion of your total assets simply because you haven't built the other 2/3 yet. That's fine. The reserve comes first sequentially, even if it eventually represents a smaller percentage of a much larger total. Step 2. Build your business component through low-cost diversified equities. Rather than picking individual stocks, which the ancient merchants effectively had to do, since index funds did not exist, modern investors can access the entire business category through a single low-cost index fund. A total market ETF with an expense ratio under 0.10% gives you ownership across thousands of companies simultaneously, achieving genuine diversification within this third alone. Step 3. Build your land component through real estate exposure. This can mean direct property ownership, which the ancient text literally describes, or modern equivalents like REITs, which let you access real estate returns with the liquidity of a stock and without needing to personally manage tenants or property maintenance. REITs have historically returned approximately 9% to 10% annually over multi-decade periods, comparable to equities, but with different return drivers and lower correlation to the stock market specifically. Step 4. Rebalance periodically, not constantly. The original rule does not specify rebalancing. Ancient Babylonian merchants were not running quarterly portfolio reviews, but the modern application benefits from checking your allocation once or twice a year and adjusting back toward roughly equal thirds if one category has grown significantly relative to the others. This forces a disciplined version of buy low, sell high. You trim the category that has outperformed and add to the category that has lagged, which is psychologically uncomfortable and mathematically sound. A note on flexibility. The Talmudic commentators themselves were explicit that the exact one-third split was not meant as a rigid formula, but as an illustration of a broader principle: diversify across long-term safety, long-term growth, and immediate liquidity. A 25-year-old with decades of working years ahead might reasonably tilt more heavily toward the business third and lighter on reserve, once the baseline emergency fund is established. A retiree drawing down assets might tilt the opposite direction. The ratio is adjustable. The principle, do not concentrate everything in one category, is the part that has survived 1,800 years for a reason. Section 5. What this rule gets right that modern investors often get wrong. Let's close this out by being honest about why so many modern investors, despite having access to vastly more sophisticated financial tools and information than any ancient merchant ever had, still manage their money worse than this 1,800-year-old framework would suggest. Problem 1. Overconcentration in a single category. A 2023 survey found that a significant percentage of younger investors hold more than 80% of their investable assets in equities alone, often concentrated further within a small number of individual stocks or a single sector like technology. This is the exact failure mode the 3/3 rule was designed to prevent: all the upside potential of the business category, with none of the stabilizing effect of land or reserve. Problem 2. Inadequate reserves. We've covered this extensively elsewhere in this series, but it bears repeating in this context. A majority of Americans cannot cover a $1,000 emergency from savings. The ancient rule treated the reserve third as non-negotiable money that should always be ready at hand. Modern investors frequently treat their emergency fund as an afterthought, something to build eventually, after the more exciting investing has already begun. The rabbis had the sequencing right. Reserve is foundational, not optional, not last. Problem 3. Chasing the hot category. Whatever asset class has performed best recently attracts disproportionate new investment, a pattern visible in tech stocks in the late 1990s, real estate in the mid-2000s, and cryptocurrency more recently. The 3/3 framework is structurally resistant to this temptation because it requires roughly equal allocation regardless of which category is currently fashionable. Discipline is built into the structure, rather than relying on willpower in the moment, which is, frankly, good design, because willpower in the moment is exactly what fails most investors during a hype cycle. Here is what I want you to take from this. The 33% rule is not a secret. It is not exclusive financial wisdom available only to one group of people, despite how it sometimes gets framed online. It is a piece of remarkably durable financial reasoning that happened to be preserved, debated, and refined within a specific religious and legal tradition for nearly 2,000 years. And that durability is exactly why it is worth paying attention to. A third in stable, tangible assets. A third in active growth investments. A third held safely in reserve, ready for emergencies and opportunities alike. The framework is simple enough to explain in under a minute and sturdy enough to have survived the fall of empires, the invention of currency as we know it, 2 world wars, and the entire history of the modern stock market. You do not need ancient wisdom to know that diversification matters. But it is worth knowing that this principle is not a recent invention of Wall Street risk management. It is closer to one of the oldest, most repeatedly rediscovered truths in the entire history of human wealth building. Build your reserve. Build your growth engine. Build your stable foundation. Keep them roughly balanced. Rebalance occasionally. And trust a framework that has been quietly working for 18 centuries, before anyone called it asset allocation. Hope you enjoy the content, hit the like and subscribe button, see you in the next video.